I reached out to you, Kristen, last week because I wanted to talk about sleepovers and more things that I've been thinking about and considering in regards to letting my children do sleepovers or not, based on things that I've been hearing and understanding that there's this movement happening really of families deciding not to let their children do sleepovers at all. And I was navigating an experience of one of my children being invited to a sleepover and really finding myself in this moment of really considering what it would take to allow her to go to the sleepover and different considerations about that for her safety. And I ended up having multiple conversations with the parent. And it was just this moment that I was having, but also was talking to you about conversations with parents, safety for children, sleepovers, and these different parenting choices that we need to make sometimes.
Yeah, you're at a different stage with your girls being a little bit older than mine. So this kind of movement or trend of people not letting their kids go to sleepovers, I was not even aware of until you brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's really curious. I mean, it's a very real thing that parents have to face, something that sounds so innocent, can I go sleep over at my
Mm-hmm.
friend's house? And naturally wanting to say yes, that sounds fun, but then having these very real concerns around their safety.
Mm-hmm.
And and what we're talking about really is sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
because it's so prevalent at sleepovers with
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Right.
So how are
Yeah.
you navigating that?
Well, sexual abuse, but also them just being exposed to things on media, such as pornography, or
Mm.
just them being exposed to things that we wouldn't necessarily even consider before. And so I think what really opened my mind to this was, I guess, first of all, an intuitive feeling. But there was always kind of this overriding of like, yeah, sleepovers are innocent, of course. Like it's just something that we do. But I did see a post somewhere maybe a number of months back where this mom was sharing the questions that she asks the other family before she allows her children to go for a sleepover. And it was like, of course, yeah, why wouldn't we ask these questions? I know for myself, like I feel so connected to my community here. But the reality is that I don't live in these people's homes. I don't know exactly what happens. And so there is this kind of trust, of course, that is built over time, but sometimes just like a blind trust too, without really asking the questions. And so I have kind of distilled my own list of questions and in this experience last week, really took from this list that I had seen this mom create and really found the questions that were important for me to ask, such as, is the parent going to be there the whole time? Who are who is going to be there? Are there any other adults that are going to be in the house during that time? Do the children have free access to tablets, computers, phones, games, like gaming? And if there are those things, do they have child's like filters on them? And Yeah, what are the sleeping arrangements? Where is my child going to be sleeping? I'm trying to think of what other questions I asked, but those were the main ones, specifically around like who's in the house, like what kind of media will they have access to or be exposed to, and where will my child be during this time? And they seem like such kind of simple questions, but really important, as you said, in regards to sexual abuse, knowing who's in the house, because we could think, and this has happened in our experience of sending our child for a play date or a sleepover, and then later learning that there were people that we had no idea that would be there. And that came as quite a shock and surprise to us. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think through experience, we've learned what questions that we need to ask as well.
I like that asking those questions to the other parent can cause them to have much more awareness.
Hmm.
Because I know for myself, when my kids are at my house and they're with their friends, well, I trust my kids. And so often I'm, doing things in the kitchen, or maybe I'm not watching as closely, or even thinking that they could be accessing something. If they're going up to play games, they could be accessing some area of the internet, or I don't know. I mean, I talk to my kids about all of these things, but I think if a parent was to raise concerns with me or ask these really important questions, it would cause me to think about it more closely and pay much closer attention.
Hmm.
And you bring up a good point, which is that these are concerns we deal with whether they're spending the night or not. Anytime they're going to somebody else's house, they are well, they are being exposed to a different environment and different people and different rules and different parenting approaches. So I think these are good questions kind of in general that a lot of people, myself included, don't always think about when we say yes to a play date or spending time at a friend's house. And then we sometimes learn later after they come back, oh, where did you hear that song that maybe isn't, up to my parenting standards, or maybe I wouldn't have wanted you to hear. Or yeah, oh, you were playing on the other parent's phone. Oh, well, I don't usually allow you to play with my phone. So having these conversations to kind of, well, to get on the same page and be aware, and then also maybe establish some understanding and boundaries with the other parent.
Totally. And as you mentioned, your children are a little younger, and I don't think that these questions really came into my mind as much until they were older. And maybe through having some of those experiences of like, oh, that song or that movie or that those other people that were there that I probably wouldn't have said yes to going there if I knew that they were there. And so having a number of these experiences and being like, huh, well, I think that I need to do my part in, doing the my due diligence beforehand so that I can feel comfortable and confident to say yes. And I know that I've kind of struggled with being like, okay, I don't want to come across as like micromanaging or controlling the time. Like, I really do believe in my children getting to experience how different people live and seeing different like ways that families work or being exposed to different cultures. And like, I don't need it to be exactly how it is at my house, but having these certain standards or needs. And so when I checked in with the other mom, the way I phrased it was like, oh, I'm sure my child would love to be there. That sounds so great. Thank you for the invitation. And is it okay if I ask these questions to see if it can be a yes? And so it's not saying, oh yeah, they can come, but it has to be like this. It's
Hmm.
like, hey, like let's have a bit of a dialogue and see if it will work for both of us. Or kind of establish some more discussion or more curiosity or some agreements that we can come to or not, possibly, of like, okay, well, if they are having these other people spend the night that I don't feel that comfortable with, say, like there's an older sibling, say my child's a girl, there's an older sibling who's a boy, and they've got a number of friends coming over to spend the night, and I don't know them. Maybe they're going to be unsupervised. I would get the opportunity to say, that's not going to work for us, but maybe we could do a sleep under. There it just opens the dialogue for what's happening and an ability to make choices from that.
Sleep under. I've never heard that.
We've done a few of those. Yeah, we've done a few of those for different reasons.
What is it?
A sleep under is when when the child like goes and stays until it's going to be bedtime, and
Mm.
then they get picked up. So maybe like if they're gonna stay up, watch a movie, have dinner, just kind of hang out, and then maybe instead of spending the night, they get picked up at 9:30.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we've done that for different reasons, such as maybe we had something going on the next day. One of my children just sleeps better at home or feels more comfortable at home. And then, yeah, just sometimes they do really just want to sleep over.
Hmm. How did the other parent respond when you asked those questions about the sleepover?
She was so open, and I feel so grateful for that. She just said, of course, please ask away. And then she actually thanked me and said, thank you so much for these questions. This really actually gives me a template of questions that I would like to ask. And she said sometimes she often actually doesn't feel that comfortable or can feel anxious when her child goes and spends the night somewhere. And so the questions that I asked helped her know what questions she might want to ask so that she can feel more comfortable when she sends her child off, or if she sends her child off for a sleepover. So I was so grateful that she was open and receptive and thankful as well. And that made me feel so much better about saying yes, to know that she was open. And then she would check in with me like, hey, we're going to watch this movie. Does that work for you? And so there was just that open line of communication. And I think even asking the questions, the other parent, then she can feel comfortable coming to me. Maybe if her child was going to spend the night at my house, maybe there was something that I wouldn't even think of. And maybe she knows now that we can have that open dialogue.
Yeah, that's so great. I think about how some of us are afraid to make the other parent uncomfortable or make them feel like we're judging them or um, critiquing their parenting in some way by asking these questions.
Yeah,
It's such a delicate thing. And what you said, that you didn't want to come across as kind of controlling or overbearing in some way.
exactly.
And there is kind of this blind trust in a lot of cases. Even I'm guilty of that sometimes, right? Where it feels like, oh, it's our neighbor. We've hung out so many times. I know them pretty well. I understand their parenting to be kind of similar to the way that we parent our kids. And so, yeah, we just kind of assume that it's all the same or it'll all be fine.
Mhm.
And it's kind of uncomfortable to ask these questions, maybe even especially if we already know them.
Totally.
And so we shy away from asking them. But in your experience, it sounds like it was really positive and it actually maybe brought you closer to this parent and normalized these questions and then kind of inspires the other parent to then do the same, ask the same questions. And we're all, maybe all the parents are asking these questions now, right? And we're all having these conversations and then it just allows everyone to feel so much more comfortable.
I definitely have felt that discomfort, especially when it's somebody that I feel close with, that it's like, I don't want you to feel like I don't trust you. I don't want you to think that I have some kind of preconceived idea about your parenting. And so I do my best to communicate that it's about me doing my due diligence as a parent. Like, for me, need to ask these questions, and it doesn't have anything to do with you and who you are. It's just these are kind of the standard things that I need to ask, or maybe it's even a new thing that I'm implementing. And based on what I've come to learn or understand, or based on past experiences, I really need to ask these questions for me and for my child. And what I've just come to understand is like the risk of what could happen is greater than my discomfort in asking the questions. And it's more important for me to feel uncomfortable and ask the uncomfortable questions or have the uncomfortable conversation or situation in order to avoid what could be a much more uncomfortable situation or harmful situation. And so when I know that I've asked the questions and had the conversations for me and for my family, then I can feel more confident that I've done my part to ensure their safety and well-being.
Right, because we know these things happen all the time when when people don't expect it, when people would never guess that that would happen.
Totally. Right. And I will say that we've been in a situation before that we did have conversations with the other family about our needs or requests, and those requests were not met. And they were agreed, but then not met.
Mm.
And then we had to make a choice of like, okay, well, we can't actually do play dates or sleepovers at this friend's house anymore. So even though we've had really great experiences with communication, we have also had experiences that weren't great, that then we had to make a different parenting choice that was not the one that we wanted to make or wish that we would have had to make, but needed to make.
Yeah, following through, holding that boundary. I had the conversation, the parent agreed, and then it wasn't honored. The agreement was broken. And
Mhm.
so now we have to hold a boundary here. I'm curious how you explained that to your child who maybe wanted to go back over there to their friend's house.
It was tough in the moment, but we just kind of laid it out, and they know our family plan and they know what was communicated with the other family. And I think initially my child was really like disappointed or even embarrassed, like, oh, they're gonna think my parents are so strict, or like they're not gonna want to hang out with me anymore, or yeah, just some discomfort or feelings of insecurity around that. But then also, I think there's a level of protection that they feel that actually makes them feel more confident
Mm.
and cared for. in the bigger picture. Like in the moment, it can feel uncomfortable. Like, what is this going to mean for my friendship? What are
Mhm.
they going to think about me? How am I going to navigate this? But then what I've noticed over time is there's this like greater feeling of confidence. Like, look at my parents, they care for me and they're looking out for me. And then maybe getting to see that other child what maybe the consequences of that action or non-action that led to us not allowing our child to go there.
Such a teaching moment for everyone involved, for your kid, for the other kid, for the other kid's parents,
Mm-hmm.
of yeah, communication and boundaries and safety and following through.
Mm-hmm.
And for the kid, that makes so much sense, this fear of the social impact or social rejection because of this decision that my parents are making.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes up all the time. I mean, that's like the primary concern, especially when you're at that age of 10, 11, 12, 13, and up.
Mm-hmm.
So to navigate that as a parent and to decide, I know, to say to yourself, I know my kid's going to experience some discomfort around this,
Mm-hmm.
but then to decide what's more important is that I will, one, keep them safe and make sure we are staying aligned with our family plan or our parenting values, but two, also holding these boundaries and giving them this feeling of safety, even if they can't recognize it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what boundaries do. They create safety and containment.
Mm-hmm. Right. And sometimes our children, we have to understand that sometimes our children won't know that or agree with it in the moment, but we have to hold that kind of like steadfast knowing as the adults of the right thing to do, even when there's that pushback or upset or like, how could you? Or like, I don't want that. And it's such a balance as a parent, I find, to have that flexibility and those boundaries. Like, let them go and explore the world and have their own experiences. And I do need to protect you in these certain ways. And I think there are, that's something that I find myself navigating as a parent a lot of like, okay, I want them to, they're gonna have to have failures. They're gonna have to have negative experiences. They're gonna have to have their own learning and growing and teaching, life teaching moments. And then also really clarifying like what am I not going to allow them to experience? Like what will I put my protective guard up against and my boundaries up against? And I'm so curious, like, yeah, your thoughts on that and how you've navigated that in your own ways.
I connect so much to my own experience as an adolescent where I was desperate for those limits to be put in place for me. And at the same time, the most important thing in my world was social acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always choose social acceptance over my truth and what I really wanted
Mm-hmm.
at that time in my life. And so and that's what most adolescents experience. Social acceptance and finding your community and fitting in and belonging is like the primary concern at that stage of life. And so it's even more important that the parent steps in to lay down the limit and create the safety and hold the boundary,
Mm-hmm.
as the kid is not capable, in most cases, of making the right choice for them in
Mm-hmm.
in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And I yeah, I can connect to certain moments where there was this feeling of unsafety within me
Mm-hmm.
about going along with the group and going to the place or doing the thing that the group was doing, but feeling like I did not have a no, like nothing was more important than avoiding rejection. And so I couldn't make that right choice for myself. And feeling this, yeah, this desperation for the adult, some adult, any adult to step in and hold that line. And that I think I would have experienced both of the things we're talking about, the embarrassment, and fear of being rejected, but at the same time, relief
Mm-hmm.
and safety
Mm-hmm.
to feel cared for in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I think it's like resilience through that anxiety. Like you get to experience maybe not having that social connection that you feel so desperate for, or that the child or adolescent feels so desperate for and that they're clinging to. But then if they get that, no, we're taking a pause, or we're not continuing to feed that social interaction, then the child gets to learn that they're okay without it as well, even though it might feel really hard. Or, yeah, that resilience, that kind of okayness in the discomfort, because it's almost like if we keep allowing and allowing and allowing, it almost feeds the anxiety of like, I need this, I need this, I need this as well.
Mm.
And I know I sent you this video. We'll have to put a link in the description of her name, but she was this police detective in Australia for sexual abuse cases. And now she is teaching families about how to spot predators, spot dangerous situations in order to avoid our children being exposed to it. And one thing that she says is like, she will not, she advises parents to not send her children to sleepovers unless she is confident that they can say no to things that they're uncomfortable with, whether
They're
that's
they're confident that their kid can say no.
that their kid can say no.
Mm.
Yeah. And this is such a big one. If I can find the research article, I'll link it. But it was something along the lines of like, the thing that adolescent girls, and I imagine boys too, but this one was specific to girls, the thing that they struggle with the most is saying no to their peers.
Hmm.
And it was something like some ridiculously high percentage of girls cannot say no, or feel huge amount of trepidation or social ramifications if they were to say no. And so that is such clear information of what we need to do to support our children in life in general, support our girls, support our adolescents in general. And then in the context of this conversation, especially before putting them in these situations that they can be exposed to so many things that we would never want them to.
Right. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And so as the adult, we need to be those eyes. We need to help guide them to say no, but sometimes we have to be the no so they don't have to be.
Hmm.
That we don't have to put them in this situation that it's way bigger than they have the capacity to meet at that time. And I just feel so sad to, think about myself as an adolescent, think of you, as you just shared in these moments that you felt unsafe, or, yeah, moments that I felt unsafe and really, really would have wanted to say no. And what's kind of funny is I felt like I always got caught in those moments. Like if I do something that I knew I was uncomfortable with and probably needed to say no, or more importantly, needed an adult to prevent me from being in that situation in the first place, that I ended up being like found out or caught. It was like maybe my unconscious way of communicating or asking for help with what was happening.
Wow. Yeah, and I think about the modeling too that we're doing when we do step in and, like in your case, holding that line and saying, okay, you're not allowed to go back to that friend's house because an agreement was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's yes, stepping in to say the no because that's what our kids need us to do because they don't know how to handle these situations and honor their own no or recognize that that needs to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also a beautiful modeling of this is how you do it. This is normal to
Mm-hmm.
communicate and come to an agreement. And when an agreement is broken or a situation is not okay or feels unsafe, there's a very clear no, there's a very clear boundary. And that showing our kids that then I imagine makes it easier for them to embody that as they grow older as well.
Totally. And I think that me knowing that I'm doing my due diligence first, it doesn't put them in a situation before they're ready to have to say no. And I mean, yeah, having to learn that sometimes, and as a forethought or an afterthought to something that happened, of like, darn it, they had to be in that situation. That was too big of a situation for them to be put in,
Mhm.
and I can't really put it on my 10-year-old. I can't really put it on my 12, 13, 14-year olds, to be the one to handle all that pressure, being in a completely different environment. And yeah, just taking that responsibility as the parent and as the adult, and exactly doing that, creating that example for them so that they will build that ability over time through watching.
That is so big.
Mm.
Um, so what I was thinking about when you said that is even my own internal narrative sometimes of, well, I trust my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had these conversations. And, I've modeled and spoken to them about saying no when they feel uncomfortable and they know what the rules are in our house and yada yada, right? And so I trust my kid to be able to handle these situations and I don't have to maybe be super involved. And when they mess up in certain situations or they make the wrong choice, we want to respond by saying, hey, I trusted you. You knew better. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about this, kind of like, what's wrong with you? Why did you make this choice?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than actually recognizing what is their capacity to make the right decision based on their brain development and where they are in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might cognitively understand what the rule is at home, but that doesn't mean in a moment of pressure and confusion and wanting to fit in with their friends and having a child's brain that they're going to be able to tap into that and make that adult decision.
Totally. Yeah, it's a completely different situation when they're, I mean, even just with their friend. It could be at my house and they're with a friend. I know I'm thinking back to when my children were younger and they had a friend over and they did something that they wouldn't usually do. They would probably never do if the friend wasn't there. And so realizing that they are, I don't, the word's not coming to me, but their like capacity just isn't the same, or their ability isn't the same when they have that added pressure of a friend there. And then especially being at a friend's house in regards to a sleepover at night, they're in a vulnerable position. They're at somebody else's house. It's their parent is not there to go and check in on or have support with or anything. And so they're certainly compromised, in their ability. And that's something that I've had to learn. And because same, it's like, wait, why didn't you say no? Why did you do that? Why did, like we've had these conversations so many times, like, this. And it's like, oh, wait, that's not for them to know. That's not for them to have to be put in a situation like that. Yes, they can grow that over time, and they will grow that over time. But as the parent, I have to understand exactly their brain development, their their abilities, and what is real is that they are compromised in their decision making around their peers at times, because it is so important to have that social connection. This is their friend, and the risk to them feels really high. Like, if I speak out, what's going to happen? And then they're in a totally different environment.
Yeah. So I'm just not going to put you in that situation. I'm not going to put my child in the situation to be really vulnerable and feel that fear and uncertainty and pressure to make the right choice when I understand it's not fair to them and they probably don't have the capacity to do that.
And as the adult, we can recognize when they do have that capacity
Mhm.
and support them to grow in that capacity. And so maybe there are little ways that they stood up and did the right thing. And maybe that's something that we can help grow. But we need to, as parents and caregivers, to be the ones overseeing and doing our due diligence beforehand and really understanding what's realistic, what's a realistic expectation for them. And am I putting all the responsibility on my child? I mean, if we're nervous as the parents to have the conversations, right? As we mentioned earlier in this conversation, like, we're nervous to have those uncomfortable conversations. And then we want our children to be able to do it. Like, we need,
I, yes,
right?
I thought about this. It's so funny you're saying that. I thought about this, I think it was yesterday or the day before, because my daughter, who is almost 7, um, has an interesting dynamic with one of the kids on the bus, who's also her friend. But they tend to, the other kiddo tends to get really upset about who gets on the bus and off the bus first. And
Mm.
so that has been an ongoing issue that they've been navigating together. And my daughter expressed she asked if she could be a car rider. Can you drive me to school today instead? And so exploring why revealed that she was feeling anxious about getting into a conflict with this other friend about getting on or off the bus first. And and the conflict being that the other kiddo sometimes gets really dysregulated and instead of using her words has pushed Maven, my daughter. And so so I said, well, let's talk about it. We'll go down to the bus stop a little bit early. and we'll pull your friend aside and we'll have a conversation and see if we can come up with a plan. And I recognized in myself some anxiety about not about talking to this kiddo and helping them problem solve, but about the other parent being present and how they would feel about it. And going through, okay, well, maybe I should pull the parent aside first and let her know, hey, this is what's happening. And I thought we could talk all together and come up with a plan. And so I noticed this push-pull inside of myself around how to approach this. And the part of me that's also in, a lot of situations and trying to build competence says, and tries to involve my kiddo in the problem solving. Okay, well, how do you think we should approach this? Do you feel comfortable having a conversation with your friend? Maybe before you get on the bus, you talk about it. So trying to leave room for her to do it, but then sensing if she wants me to step in and help too, then I'll do that. And yeah, so it was this interesting process. I had that exact thought of, if I'm feeling this anxious about it, how is my 6-year-old feeling? And how can I expect my 6-year-old to go into this situation and have these tough conversations with ease and, for it all to go well? When as adults, we feel that trepidation and that anxiety about offending or saying it wrong with the other parent.
Right. Or what is their response going to be? Are they going
Yeah.
to judge me, or are they going to be angry, or, yeah, feel judged by me? I mean, all the different questions that we have for sure that can make it hard to have those conversations, or want to avoid those conversations as much as possible, of like, okay, yeah, I'll just drive you, versus
Yes.
you, versus like, okay, actually, this is a challenge.
Or
This might,
even,
yeah,
yeah, or even unconsciously putting it on our kids because we're uncomfortable and we don't want to have the conversation with the parent. So we say to our kid, well, this is your problem. You need to figure it out. You should be able to go talk to your friend. I don't say this, but I can imagine people doing that.
right. Or the thoughts that we have, right?
Yes.
Or why didn't you talk to them? Why didn't you stick up for yourself? Right. When we have our own
Right.
discomfort for doing that.
Right, right. And not recognizing that that's our own avoidance and
Hmm.
kind of masking it with, oh, I want them to feel competent. They're building the skill, they need to figure this out,
Hmm.
which, that can be a piece, but really there's this maybe avoidance in us that we're covering up.
Hmm. Wow, that's so insightful to like really be like, okay, is this a situation that my child really does need to learn competence, or has the competence, and I'm really guiding them to use that, or am I avoiding my own discomfort in putting it on them and expecting them to have it figured out because I don't want to, or I don't feel competent to.
Hmm.
And as you were talking, I also had this like awareness, as we're talking about protecting our kids or helping our kids have conversations, of this idea of like helicopter parents. And like, as the parent, I'm like, okay, what's happening at the sleepover? Like, I'm going to be right there. Call me. Like, I'll do all the things for you. And so there's such a balance in what I'm talking about, what we're talking about when I'm saying, like, doing my due diligence, or not putting my child in a situation that maybe they're compromised or not able to do what they need to do. And so just like finding that balance between letting them experience life, helping them to grow their competence in their ability, not like diminishing it through overstepping and doing everything as the adults, but finding that like proper child development, acknowledging where they're at, acknowledging the need if they're able to handle it, stepping in as a parent when I need to, but not doing it in a way that's stunting their competence and their ability. like growing that alongside. So just having that kind of awareness of like difference between like helicopter parent and like present parent.
Yes, it's not, oh, my kid is having an issue. I'm going to jump right in and solve this for them. It's okay, let's take a pause. Maybe I stay back for a moment or two and I observe and I give them the space and the opportunity to problem solve or think about what they want to do or how they want to approach it. If it seems like I'm needed, maybe I do lead with some questions. How do you want to handle this? Do you have an idea about how we could resolve this? So again, leaving space for them and not letting them flounder in
Mhm,
anxiety if they really feel stuck.
mhm,
Tuning into them. And if what they need in that moment is for some help or some guidance, then that's when you step in. You don't say, well, you need to figure this out on your own, because then they're feeling overwhelmed with their anxiety and they're learning that, well, help isn't there when I need it.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, such an interesting consideration of like, is there a time that I also need to support my child in their competence? And like, when is it necessary to step in? And there's that term like like scaffolding parent, like you're there like helping and then you kind of like slowly wane as they learn to do it themselves. And I know in like sibling conflict with my children is similar. Like I really, as much as I possibly can, give them the opportunity to come to their own resolution and conclusion, which may be very different than what I originally thought. And it's so much better that way because then they feel a closeness and capability without me needing to step in and be there every step of the way. But then there are times where I'm like, okay, I do need to be there and kind of help to facilitate this conversation, help bring in the questions or slow it down or whatever is needed. And so there really is like a not a one size fits all for every situation. It's about attuning to the moment and what is needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking about, so those situations where our kids are going to a friend's house and or spending time with friends wherever they're doing it, even if it's at our house, but spending time with friends who have different rules and maybe, I think I brought up the phone example earlier. So like a kiddo who's allowed to play on their parents' phone, or go on YouTube and watch videos on YouTube, which is not allowed in my house. How to navigate that with other parents is something I'm kind of sitting with, because I'm aware of these moments of discomfort where my child is makes a decision that is completely understandable, but is based on the influence of the friend that is something that we're not comfortable with. Um, yeah, or doing things that we're not comfortable with. And part of me thinks about the kind of easy backdoor way of going about this by simply kind of stating your boundaries to the other parent in some way, like, hey, they're so excited to come play. Just so you know, we don't allow violent video games in our house. Or just so you know, we don't let our kid play on the cell phone, something like that, right? Just to kind of state how it works in our house and how that somehow feels safer to me than asking, how do you do this at your house? Because the question is kind of like, well, I'm evaluating, it can come across as I'm evaluating how you parent
Mm-hmm.
rather than, hey, this is how I parent.
Mm-hmm.
Please align with my parenting when my child is involved, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think it's totally fine to just, and really necessary at times, to just clearly state what's okay and not okay with you or how you do it at your house. And as you were saying, like, as you're asking the questions, it seems like you're kind of evaluating and like maybe not giving enough information of why you're
Mm-hmm.
asking the question. And so I think it's important to maybe have a request of like, hey, and really clarify what that is. I mean, if they're on the phone at the other friend's house, you can kind of check in and be like, okay, am I okay with her being on the phone at all? And if I am okay with her on the phone, then what are my kind of needs around that? Maybe they're not browsing the internet. Maybe they're not using it the whole time. You know, you think of what that is for you. And then kind of stating your need or request. Like, hey, I know that they like use the cell phone to make videos. It's really important to me that they're not browsing the internet, or like, you know, that won't work for me. And of course, then there's more like clarifying questions of like, are they alone? Are they in a room? Like, are they going off with the phone? And, or if there's a tablet or something, like, are there parental controls? You know, maybe you are okay with them like browsing music or, you know, looking up certain YouTube videos, but you also want to know that there's parameters such as maybe time spent on it or what they might be exposed to. And so it's kind of really clarifying your needs, making those requests or asking clarifying questions or just simply stating a boundary like, hey, I'm like, I know that they've been playing video games. I know this has been so much fun for them, but I really, you know, this is a value of ours. And I'm wondering if that would still work for you, for my child to come over if they're not allowed to do that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because they might say that actually is going to be too complicated,
Right.
you know, and so it gives the ability for both people to communicate what they need or what's going to work or not work for them.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. Either way you go, explaining, even just briefly, what is behind the question or the what you're sharing, right? Yeah, this is just for me or my peace of mind, or this is a value we have in our family, or this is a rule that we try to maintain. And so this is why I'm asking, or I'm wondering about this, or I've noticed this. And so just wanted you to know
Mhm.
it's important. And then that check-in of, does this work for you? Do you think this is going to work?
Totally. And kind of going back to a situation that we had with one of my children where we ended up not letting them go to this family's house anymore. We had these clarifying conversations with the parents. It was like, oh, yes, we will be mindful of that. We agree, kind of yada yada. But not only did that thing happen, but then there was a conversation to my child about the conversation that the adults had. And that was so embarrassing of like, oh no, we can't do that because so and so's here now.
Mm,
And so it's just, I mean, it's a learning experience, you know. We're not going to avoid every challenge or hiccup that happens, but it's information. Oh, okay, well, that's information that we tried to have these conversations, but that just simply didn't work out, even though we got a yes from the other parent. And that's, I mean, it's their responsibility to agree to what they're able, or just simply say, this is such a part of our life and what we do that that won't work. And so I think that speaking your needs and our needs gives the opportunity for the other party to really speak their truth. And then maybe there's, like in the sleepover situation last week, there were certain things that I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen. But they're going to be staying up till 11 or 12. And I was like, okay, well, that's something that I don't do at home, but I'm willing to say yes to in this situation, So it just creates that, just that open dialogue.
So with that other example you brought up, it's almost like the other parents missed the opportunity to ask a clarifying question when they agreed to it and said, okay,
Mhm.
we won't do social media or whatever the
Yeah,
agreement was.
it was Snapchat specifically, that one.
Yeah. So, okay, we won't let the girls use Snapchat.
Mhm.
Um, a clarifying question or a follow-up question could have been on their part, how how would you like me to communicate that? Or do you have any ideas about how I could communicate that? Because I know that my kiddo's so used to doing this all the time that they're going to want to do it, and
Mhm.
I don't want to make your kid uncomfortable. And so this problem solving together of
Yeah.
how should I communicate that so that it makes sense and I'm not making you or your kid look bad or
Mhm.
make them uncomfortable.
Totally. Yeah, I love that part. And I've had a few really great conversations with parents opening up that vulnerability of that dialogue. Maybe one of them coming to me about a certain question or concern, or me coming to them, and then being able to go a little deeper of like, how do you think I should handle this? How do you think I should talk to them about it? Or this is my perspective on it. Oh, this is my perspective. And just kind of being able to expand the perspective and the narrative and deepen relationships with other families and parents. But I love that you brought that in, what it could have looked like from their end. They're so used to being on social media. They go on Snapchat every time their other friends come over. How am I gonna, like, I want your child to come over, but this might be kind of awkward.
Hmm.
This might be kind of uncomfortable. And how am I gonna do this? And I'm trying to think. There was a situation where the host of the children was having to make a choice that was going to be different than they usually did when they had the kids over. And so I'm remembering that they asked, like, how should I approach this? How should I talk about it? And that was a conversation that we had. And it was something along the lines of, like, oh, the other parent, like all of us parents agreed together, or a consensus of just, and that really helped relieve some of the pressure from the parent or the parents, like putting it on anyone, because for the parent hosting, it didn't quite feel fair to be the one to be like, okay, well, we're switching it all up. We're creating a whole new plan. And so it's almost like, yeah, how to create a plan that doesn't put the pressure necessarily on any one family or child. And I think that's why it's so great to have these clarifying conversations.
I love this approach to collaboration with other parents as opposed to defensiveness. I feel like so often, if another parent brings a concern to us about our child,
Mhm.
we're wired to defend our kid.
Mhm.
rather than problem solving together. It's like it doesn't have to be, oh, your child seems to be struggling with regulating their emotions, or they're putting hands on my kiddo when they get really upset. It doesn't have to mean your kid is bad, and clearly you're doing something wrong at home as parents if your kid is engaging this behavior, right? Because that's where we don't even hear, we don't problem solve, we just immediately want to defend ourselves as parents and defend our kid, when it could just be this great opportunity to collaborate. And I know I've been so just inspired by some conversations that you have, some of which you've already shared about, and others too, where you have said that you and another parent were able to share with each other, oh, my kid experiences your kid like this.
Mhm.
And oh, how interesting. You're both able to take that in. How interesting. Yeah, I could see how that could be true. And then vice versa, their kid experiences your kid in this other way. And this seems to be a dynamic that's happening. And like it's all just information. It's a way to better understand your kid in a social context. And for it not to have to be, oh, you're having problems with this kid, you can't be friends with them anymore.
Mhm.
But no, we can maybe still be friends and just figure out how to support each other more to make it safe and healthy.
Mhm. Yeah, and realizing that there's opportunity for us as parents to grow through the conflicts that our children are going through as well. And in regards to one of the conversations that I know I've shared with you, it was like one of my children was feeling quite left out and having tension with this other classmate. And it was really tough. And I was hearing one perspective of my child, and the other parent was hearing the perspective of their child. And it could have easily been one of those situations where it was like, this is just not going well. This, other child is hurting you, and, maybe we just need to have space or write them off or whatever. And I had such a fascinating conversation with the other parent that it was like, this is what my child's experiencing. What is your child experiencing? And it was kind of challenging in a way to hear what the other child was saying about mine, but it was also like, wow, I can see that. And so grateful for this information because now it gives me more opportunity to understand what's going on and be able to support my child through this in ways that I may not have known before talking with this other parent. And I'm so grateful to this other parent for their honesty and vulnerability, but also that willingness to build that trust with me and to build that safety in conversation. Because, of course, it could go so many different ways. And I've had those conversations that have started that way too, of like, your child, this. And it's like, okay, wait, hold on a second. Let's slow this down to really understand both sides. And so I've been through tough conversations. I'm so grateful for the other families and parents to be able to go through these moments with me and come out the other side, that we have built those foundations of open communication and say, we've been through this, like let's keep the channel open, and have only experienced benefit from it. I mean, since these conversations, us as parents have been holding and helping our kids, and we've watched the transformation happen over time.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah, not always easy, but worth it.
totally worth it. Yeah. Yeah. Us parents need to stick together and support each other.
Yeah, and realize that I mean, we're not perfect. Our child's not perfect. The other families aren't perfect. And I mean, the reality is that not everybody might be available or open to have these kind of conversations. But it's worth a try when we can and to see our part so that we can model for our kids and grow where we need to in ourselves.
Hmm. Okay, I have one other piece that I wanted to process with you in real time related to the sleepover thing.
Hmm.
So, so my, so I have a 9-year-old son and a almost 7-year-old, so 6-year-old daughter. And my daughter, my 6-year-old, always wants to be included, of course, in my son's sleepovers. So when he has a friend sleepover at our house, she wants to be right in there with them. She wants to be sleeping next to them in the bed or on the floor in sleeping bags, wherever they're sleeping. She wants to be there. And not just be there, it depends on the friend, but she wants to usually be in the middle. And
Oh.
and there's one friend in particular that she adores. But you know what? I think it's happened with multiple friends. She loves being in the middle. I mean, she's a cuddler and she wants to be sandwiched between two people. And she also wants to be close to the guest, the exciting guest. Of course, now that we're in like age 9 for my son and his friends who are spending the night, and I've had you brought up this, this topic of exposure and safety when it comes to sleepovers, so that's been top of mind. I I'm thinking about how I want to approach this with my daughter.
Hmm.
And it came up just a few days ago where a boy was spending the night with my son and she wanted to be right next to him. And granted, we know this family very well. This is like the sweetest, most innocent little child that we know, honestly. So we felt very comfortable given that. But at the same time, my husband and I were sitting with this, oh, okay, how do we, like, we were noticing our own discomfort with her sleeping next to a boy who's a little bit older than her. And how innocent she is and how innocent they are. And just because it's a boy and a girl doesn't actually mean anything. It could be a girl and a girl, but it's more of like the age gap. Um, and just this possibility of, well, is this something we're comfortable with? And if
Hmm.
it's something we're not comfortable with, how do we communicate that in a
Mm.
way that doesn't send some kind of message that we don't want to send about whatever, boys and girls and touching each other, and we don't want to freak her out, but we want to make a good choice and we want to feel comfortable. We want everyone to feel comfortable and safe.
And so, what did you guys decide? Did you decide that you didn't feel comfortable with it, or you did, or maybe you're comfortable with it for now, but maybe not in the future?
So we said we weren't comfortable with it.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to remember actually how we phrased it. We said we wanted the boys to be next to each other and have their space. And we invited my daughter to sleep with us, my husband and I, and sleep in the middle in between us.
Hmm.
And she thankfully, I think, was fine. She thankfully was fine with that compromise.
Right. She's like, okay, great. Opportunity to sleep between
But
mom and dad. Yeah.
yeah, but if she wasn't,
Right.
we kind of got away. We got lucky there because we were like, well, if this was more of a fight where we had to do some more explaining, we better figure out how we want to explain this.
Hmm. And did you guys come up with how you were going to explain it?
No, we're still sitting with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one because I'm so right there with you of like it's innocent and we don't want to like put something there that's not there. And noticing, okay, the age difference, boy and girl, like what do we feel about that? And the reality is that there was some discomfort. You didn't feel 100% okay with it. And maybe it's the clarifying. I mean, like, what was it, the age gap, or that it was a boy and a girl that was the most uncomfortable for you?
I think it's the age gap. And and what we know about our daughter is that um she has a tendency to go along with what her friends say to do. So even if she knows we have a rule of no fill in the blank, no phone, no playing with an adult's phone, if her friend says, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Here, play with the phone." She'll do it because she's 6 and her so we've learned that for her in particular, her social relationships even this early on are really important. And so part of it is not trusting her to be able to say, wait a minute, this feels uncomfortable if somebody was to cross, another child was to cross a line with her. And then yeah, just the age difference. I think what my husband and I recognized after that conversation that or that situation that we were not prepared for is that we need to start having more of these conversations with both of our kids around all of the things that we've been talking, where we started this conversation, right? Of
Totally.
how, and I don't even know if maybe we need to circle back to that. How do we talk to our kids about these concerns in order to empower them and give them information and um, increase their ability to say no or ask for help or speak up if something does cross a line without freaking them out and planting these ideas or instilling fear.
That's something that I'm definitely still thinking and figuring out, especially as my children grow. It's like a different conversation at each age or a different way to approach it at each age. And that's something that I try to reconcile within myself of like, how am I gonna talk to my children about the dangers of the world or certain like potential dangers of the world without making them afraid of the world
Hmm.
or yeah, kind of ruining that innocence for them. And those are like things that I'm juggling of like I don't want to put something in their mind and I want them to know that they're protected. But I also want them to know what to look out for should a situation arise. And in terms of sexual abuse, this one has been on my mind more as I'm learning how prevalent it is in, I mean, at like sleepovers, but also that like 90%, I mean, disclaimer here, but like 90% of sexual abuse happens with someone that the child knows. I mean, that's shocking. And then learning about the numbers, it's just felt more important to understand how to have these kind of conversations and going back to that idea before of like the risk is too high to avoid like having this conversation. And so this woman that I had mentioned before, who was the police detective, we will find her and link her information on her website. She has, I think, like certain cards or a certain guidebook for different age range of how to talk to children, like different cards, like different questions or different conversation starters. So that was cool. And from my own research, learning like from so young, we start by teaching our children correct anatomy, correct words, correct anatomy, body autonomy. Who is allowed to touch you? Like who is and in what case, and when is it? Who's a safe person? What is the name for your body parts? And then I mean, this is all in terms specifically of sexual abuse, not just like saying no in general. And then as my children are getting older, teaching them of like, there's no reason that an adult needs to be alone in a room with you, touching you, or like, trying to create this kind of closeness. Or from what I'm understanding from this woman is like predators will create a certain kind of closeness with a child. They will seek to get them alone. They will love bomb the child to make them feel special, that they have some kind of special connection, that this predator has a way of, like seeing the child and making them feel seen and loved in a certain way, and then creating, a special game, as a way to be really confusing. And then, of course, the asking secrets. That's another big thing is like, as parents, we should not be asking our kids to keep secrets, or like, don't tell your dad that I let you have ice cream, like all these little ways that we make it okay to keep secrets. And so, building that communication with our kids, helping them be aware of themselves, helping them know what kind of relationships are safe, and then yeah, as they get older, what kind of things to look out for.
And with kids, when kids inappropriately touch other
Right.
kids, as does happen a lot, it's not this predatory situation
Mhm.
in a lot of cases. It's right, it's an innocent kid who has some curiosity about touching or saw something that makes them want to explore, and maybe they haven't learned about consent and bodily autonomy and all these things that you were talking about. So it can happen in the most kind of innocent of ways too.
Mhm.
And so maybe it comes back to I'm not going to put my kid in a vulnerable situation where this could possibly happen.
Right.
So back to my daughter, even if it is a
Out
really
of
sweet
innocence.
kid
Yeah.
that we like and we trust and we know the family, well, we know this is always kind of a possibility. And if we can't navigate that with her, we can't explain in a way that we're comfortable. She can't understand in a way that makes sense to her that we don't want her sleeping in the room with the boys or sleeping in the middle. Well,
Mhm.
then maybe we just don't create those situations. Maybe we just don't do sleepovers until they're older. Maybe we do sleep unders.
Yeah, yeah, totally. You can stay, you can even bring your jammies, you can get all the way there, and then it's yeah, time for pickup. And that goes back to not letting our children do sleepovers until we're confident that they can say no in whatever situation that they're in. And maybe with our children, like having that communication of like, hey, like it's really hard to say no sometimes. It's really hard to have those uncomfortable conversations. And so like it's so important for us to build that strength so that we can maybe grow into that possibility of doing a sleepover or, whatever it is, that's a tool that we're implementing and growing into more, so that it can feel safe and be safer.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
this is a long one, but
I
such
know.
a good one. There's so many pieces to consider, and that was fun
Right.
to bounce it off each other and just explore.
Totally. And there's so many more questions that I want to explore more. So, yeah, grateful for this conversation and to continue.